Hello there, I hope you're well and things are relatively okay for you. An introduction, Exploratory Minds project is something that I did during the lockdown days of COVID because I had to occupy my brain with something. And it was subjects, many different subjects and that I've come across here and there. 3D printing, psychology, composite materials which tied in 3D printing, 3D printing with our health industry. It was quite a bit on 3D printing. The technology that was in the 90s but way ahead of its time of the SR-71 reconnaissance aircraft. So all of that is something that I want to reiterate some of that because new information has come to light. On composite materials, 3D printing, and all this. So it's a restart, as well as some older of those videos will be redone with new information eventually, sometime next year. I'm going to say rather different on this. I haven't got this going for this video, this microphone. It's a tablet PC recording because this has died. I've been trying to get it going again. Let me just one attempt at this. One more attempt, we'll see what happens. If I fire up OBS, does it detect it? Apply. No, you normally see lights come on. Video capture device, that is not detecting it at all. It did have some problems, a bit of a loose wire, I think. So I want to talk about the psychology of, which I'll write about eventually, of online bullies. And I don't mean the haters here and there. Like we all can be disagreeable, and some people are generally more hateful than others. We all have tiffs with different things, and some people are way more impatient than others. I'm talking about the people who are so dysfunctional they're addicted to their dysfunction. They're using the internet to make themselves feel more comfortable and justified about their lack of success out there in the real world. But the problem is, although they're using the internet as the escapism to be something that they're not, and claim, oh, it's the rest of the world that are the problem, not them, and hating through the channels of the internet, the problem with that is the internet is an extension of the real world. But they create these avatars that they become extremely attached to. They create these fictional arenas of so-called friends, and they will even call them family, which they are not actual family, they're not relatives. This is underlining a suspicion of real family members they've had enough of them, or they're outcasts from them, or they don't want anything to do with them, or they're in such a poverty-stricken area that it becomes lonely for them. And people with the smarts mentally leave poverty-stricken areas if they are smart enough to have reasonably paid jobs, and the companies say, oh, we're going to get you a transfer because such and such a outlet for the company, whoever they work for, is closing down, so we get you a transfer to the next town perhaps, and they'll pay travel allowance, that kind of thing. That's something they've done for me, because my town where I live has had some very serious structural damage and flood problems, and flooding from severe weather. It was just like a water bomb going off, very intense. About a month's worth of rain, actually, within less than 24 hours. So a lot of water pressure flowing downward as well, because the town is like on a hill, and a lot of water came through, flowing down the river and flowing down the street, causing it to be a river with such speed and pressure. Some of it was going around the back of some shops without proper drainage, and they had nowhere else to go, and it came to the front of the shop and busting doors open. That's what happened where I work. I get a transfer though to, now it's relatively more cleaned up. The town, the transport is working. You get on the bus and you go from A to B. So I'm being transferred to a nearby town. And the town itself is more poverty stricken than the next town, really. There's the next town was, but now it seems to be doing really, really well in new businesses opening up. But it still has its darker underbelly. But that's the problem is, again, if businesses leave areas that are not really good enough to cope with weather extremes, and the businesses suffer because of that, people leave because of weather conditions are not coped with in certain towns, what's going to be left behind is the lack of astute people. You won't get any very astute, well-off, hard-working people left behind. The people who are very dysfunctional to a level of blaming everyone else and not doing anything about their own problems, and very lonely because everybody's leaving. Those are the areas where some of these people come from, I think, through the channels of the internet. And having done a little research and looking at statistics that was shared on a Discord that I frequent, it does look that way. People were saying, oh, this is where this person's from, that we've encountered and seen that this one person is a product of their environment, because it looks like there's nothing for them to do hardly other than be using communication channels digitally to people they've never really met in person. However, the vitriol, the hate, the nastiness, we've seen unsubstantiated racism, and accusations of racism, and them being actually racist. So there's no evidence of the other people that they targeted being racist, but there's plenty of evidence of them being racist, but they claim not to be. They're of colour, black, and it doesn't do them any favours. It's just really, really bad. They raise the racist card a lot, and they also are raising fictional accusations of their targets to be they infantize the targets. If you're very inept, even as an adult, there's something infantized probably about you, because adults prefer to be taking responsibility for things that children cannot and don't get expected to. But adults, we expect adults to be adults, right? But we see when people are addicted to the dysfunction because they don't like the situation they're in, and this makes them feel more comfortable somehow. There's some psychology to that. Again, I want to be writing on a deeper layer of this. This is like an introduction to that. People are so very insecure, but want to escape via some fictional arena, completely fictional, and it's like they're wearing a virtual reality headset, even if they're not using one, dreaming that they are somehow powerful, responsible, and pointing out the errors of other people when those errors are really themselves, and they're not responsible, they are inept and not really whatever they fantasize. And you see a lot of fantasies of people being truth seekers, sticking to the facts, and then you find they are struggling to understand facts. Again, it's escapism, wearing a persona in order to make themselves feel comfortable. I guarantee you, everybody wears a mask, but there's different layers. How thick, metaphorically, how thick the mask is dictates to whether the person's more grounded and reality driven to understand reality, or preferring to escape. And that's really the key word here, escaping and diving deeper and deeper into the denialism, because they are addicted to it like it's crack, like it's some hardcore drug, because they hate the situation that bad. And this is not to give such vitriol from some of these people any excuse or empathy, because at some level I'm sure they can admit to themselves, like, oh, we need help, or they need help, and they need to plug themselves into a community where they could get that help. And you can do that via the internet, instead of accusing those who are doing far better than them, and attacking them because you hate their success. How dare they? Narcissists do this. I feel like most people don't understand narcissism enough to the degree of understanding how bad it can be. And sure, even sociopathy some levels of sociopathy don't have to be as bad as you might think. But when it comes to narcissism is an escaping of the reality, pretending that you're something that you're not. 100% denialism. Narcissists will always, and this is where people misunderstand, they think they can cope with a narcissist without having the tools to cope with it. And I'll get into the tools at some point, but you still have to be careful. And it's a lot of hard work, a lot of homework, hard work, coping with a narcissist in your life. The devout narcissist, again, yeah, maybe there's levels, but if there's enough to be seen, if there's enough for an expert to say, yeah, you're diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, then look out, because narcissists will always, underline the word always, 1 billion times or infinite times, they will always destroy themselves. But the problem with that is they drag others down with them. Do you have somebody in your life who's always demanding what they want, and they always twist things around to be about them? And if there's an argument that really, like, you're the victim, but it's always twisted, they're the victim. Do you feel like you're owned and you always have to obey the demands? Do you feel like you've lost your identity almost? That's because you're a victim of a narcissist. I don't know what to say. I hope you can escape, because I've seen that happen to a family member. They existed in every way, shape or form for this other person, and it was difficult for me to cope with that because I wanted to help them out as a family member, but this narcissistic ass was always in the way of anything that was progressive. Again, that's something else narcissists do. They stand in the way of progress because they are not rooted in reality, and there's no parts of adding something to the baseline of what the reality is, the real situations, in order to get a better life or progress in your life. because it's always twisted with, oh, what about me from the narcissist? And you always lose out. They take and take and take infinitely. They will never give. Unless there's something in it for them. But there's no sense of help me to help you so that you can be good enough to help me back. So then I can be good enough in a situation that's healthy enough to help you back. Reciprocate. Narcissists don't do that. They take and take and take and take. So I'm going to read something that is from an individual who was part of a group, is still part of this group, who ran a innocent person off a Facebook page that they were helping to mod. Sure, the person that it was for, the page, I don't personally like. A number of people don't like them, but it does not mean that anyone who's modding them condones or is nasty or whatever. People that just get to do different things on different Facebook pages. People come and go. So what? Right? You might think. Certainly. And I am witness, a number of people are witness to such vitriol from particularly this one person. And they live in a poverty-stricken area. There's some narcotic abuse. There's some weed abuse. I've talked about that on this channel before. THC, the usage from what I've seen they've boasted about using is extremely high. The THC through the roof. So they're a little bit psychotic and paranoid as well. But they are part of hating this individual just because they said something about, can you not post such a thing on the page for the safety of others. I don't know what the full story was. But they hated that. But they were there because they didn't like what the mod page, who it was about, or who it was for. And again, so the person modding for them ended up being demonized because they couldn't chase off the person they didn't like. They chased off anybody with such vitriol. But the thing is, this person, even though they hate it, said, fine, have your Facebook page. I don't want any part of this. Have at it. Bye. But they continued to harass this person even after the fact. These people have nothing to do in their lives. There's no entertainment in their lives, so they create fictional entertainment. They create fictional storylines that they apply and shove in people's face to try and look like they're the victim while they're victimizing these other people. And I think it comes from an extreme amount of loneliness. Certainly, I've seen one of this group post images publicly through the internet of one is a photo of their daughter, another is a photo of the son. And these are the ones they share, by the way. They haven't shared anything that is really amicable looking. For instance, I'll share this with you. That's me with my brother. I know I was probably late 20s, maybe, even younger than that. That's with my brother at a party. Great, we're having a good time, having a lot of fun there. There ain't nothing like that from this individual. It's a photo there. The mother's taking a selfie. So this is a mother of these people. And the son is, I think they're at a bar, looking at their phone, very disinterested. But they take it twice. There's two photos like this. Then there's another photo of their daughter. They're kind of facing the camera, but they're giving the finger, the bird, right? As if to say, screw you, mum, stop taking photos. And that's it. We haven't seen anything that's more amicable, anything having a great time, arm around each other, ready for the photo. I remember where that was, actually. It's not a public bar anymore, but we had some good times in there. And yeah, it's certainly good memories from that, and there's other good memories. And if you're going to post something that you willfully want to share over the internet about your family, why would you post something that looks inept, like as if they don't want to be part of your family? So these people are outcast in reality, in life, in their life situations, by people, and including by their family. Now, a certain person has this fictional mantra of hashtag family. They use a wolf avatar and wolf fam, and it's like wolves have a pecking order. They seem to fantasize that they're somehow the protector of the family. Again, it's in order to try to compensate for quite the opposite. Everybody wears a mask out there in reality, even within their own fiction. So if somebody says, oh, they're no good at lying, they're transparent and honest, they generally are fairly good at lying and lack transparency, and they're not too honest. But they're trying to convince you in order to bring you in as a target, so they could use you for the means to their own ends, so they can feel more comfortable about themselves. A certain individual named Steve McRae used to do that. I should have seen the red flags there, and I'm sure a number of people think, oh, should have seen the red flags. But it doesn't matter, because we all make mistakes in judging others. But keep it in mind, anybody who boasts about being a particular way, it's because they're not. Any companies that keep boasting, we're good at this and that, it really is trying to get there. It's the same with United States of America, claiming that it was the best. Well, they were trying to be improving, and the American dream should have been things in order to try and get there, not claim it's already been established. That's the same with the United Kingdom. We see failure in that psychology as well. We're not really that united, but we're trying to get there. So this is the mask a whole country can wear, being overly boasting about its expertise when there's still many holes in that. There is no such thing as perfection. In fact, perfectionists stifle creativity. If you're an artist, you will understand that, because every artist is their own worst enemy. Basically, their own worst critic, right? They have this idea in their head of what their art should be like, or what they're intending to do. But the production is never going to match, ideally, with the idea, because reality tends to do what it does, and it is what it is, right? And perfection, being perfect, is not even possible. Trying to get there, there's always room for improvement. The way I see, there's a name for it. It's like the negative optimist. There's always room for improvement. The perfectionists, those who claim to be perfect, well, they're not even bothering to try. Some of these haters, will delude themselves into thinking that they've got all the answers, and they will expose their enemies. It's all their fault, which lowers the self-awareness, because they're only aware of the fiction, not what's driving the fiction. The fictional persona is being fed and driven forward by that person's own insecurities. And the moment there's those insecurities raising its ugly head, they don't do anything about it other than dive right into the fiction over again in order to cope. So they're literally trying to run away from themselves, which is impossible, which is why they always end up with self-destruction. So there's court cases over this person's harassment, right? And they wanted to escape the online harassment. They don't have a platform out there. They're not a YouTuber. They don't. I don't call myself a YouTuber as such. There's very small amount of numbers, but in the basic baseline of things, I make YouTube videos. So you could say I'm a YouTuber, but not a big player in the game, right? But they don't even have that. They had this minuscule online presence, and they were chased off and harassed wherever they went. They had, video form is a powerful tool to help defend yourself, but they didn't have that. They had a Twitter, I think they still do, it was x.com, and Facebook, and obviously because they were modding this page, and they did this constant, excessive barrage of hating and smear campaigning against this individual just because of the vitriol they had against the person that the Facebook page was for, and they were just helping mod it. There was a victim of that circumstance. So, because there's court cases and around this, there's restraining orders, lifetime restraining orders, and court hearings over the harassment, from the best I can understand it. And this one that calls himself this wolf, recently and this is the bizarreness of this, it calls this a pro tip. Well, pro, if you ever heard anyone type in or seen anyone pro, it means professional, right? And he thinks this is a professional tip, which is bizarre because what I'm about to read to you is excessively horrendous and backward. If your rights are being ignored, don't go to that court. Of course, it's comforting out of the fiction to claim the rights are being ignored because they can't deal with who they really are. So they mangle up freedom of speech with other rights and so on, what their imagined rights are. Freedom of speech is to protect yourself against being restricted by governments. For instance, I could go into a UK bar and slate the royal family left, right and centre in a public bar in the UK. And that's actually legal. It's not illegal. I could slate the governments and so on. And my displeasure at certain politicians. That's freedom of speech. Lack of freedom of speech being taken from you would be governments dictating, kind of like what Donald Trump is doing in America, trying to tread on your freedom of speech. And you say bad stuff about him and it's no good, you get penalized for it, right? If you're not, unless you're pro MAGA for some time, then you weren't part of you're penalised for not being pro-MAGA. Now, MAGA is attacking itself because it is an embodiment of extreme narcissism and self-importance that dragged others down with them. But some of them kind of split away from that psychological operation, if you will, and every cult does this. Every cult always eventually starts crumbling and failing and gets split into factions. And then if there's lack of seeing a target outside the group, what happens then is that group attacks itself. Definitely, this whole hate group, once it's been proven to be what it is, a hate group, but once it's so proven by law and penalized properly by law, it will attack itself. It will split into factions, and they will all blame each other for what happened, because what put them into the situation of this behavior in the first place still continues. It's always somebody else's fault. So they will all blame each other. Like, you convinced me that this other group were in cahoots with the courts. You lied to me, and you had me do this and that. All these different things. It's only so many lies you can stack up before the stacking up of people pointing out the lies, that even the dumbest of the dumb that are so vitriolic and using the internet as a coping mechanism will go, hang on a minute, ready? They will twig at some things here and there, and that's the beginning of some realization that they've been played, but they will hate that just as much as they've hated this situation to start with. That drove them into this fictional nonsense. So this is a very vicious circle. They will hate that and sort of use a cognitive dissonance against that. I could never be played like this again, they probably think. And if they get played again, they will think, I could never be this wrong this many times, therefore I'm right. And by that time, they say, therefore I'm right with some other group that they're probably attacking, or some other individual they're victimizing. You don't get this broken and this vitriolic without decades of that habit going around and around and around. And the only way they're going to stop the habit is realize it's a nasty habit and replace it with something else. If you don't replace detrimental habits, they're always going to be there, especially if the ones you're trying to stop, but you can't because you haven't replaced it with anything. The nastiest habits that you might have, let it be your cue to try something different. And it's not always that easy. There's some habits I have. I really should let them be my cue to do something else instead. And I sort of play with different things here and there from some habits. Sometimes it's junk food at the wrong time of day when I'm trying to lose body fat. You don't want to eat things too stodgy or fatty too late in the day, because later in the day your metabolism drops and all this. So those are like some of the habits that perhaps I have, and others I'm not willing to share in this video right now. So that's bizarre. If your rights are being ignored, don't go to court. Well, really the best thing to do is find a way to tell the court, I think my rights are being ignored. And the court will be able to point out what your rights are, but they will try to twist it in order to look like the victim again, because it's a comforting thing in a fictional scenario that they want to be real. These people will always say, we stick to the facts, not fuckery. Actually, that's what this wolf person says. They were always, all these people always claim to be fact-driven, truth seekers. True ball of wax is a name I seem to remember. You got the word truth, truth seeker, fact seeker. boasting in their avatars or their usernames, highly likely they're going to get a lot of things wrong and not be truth seekers, not be fact driven. It's because they are they would rather the fiction be factual rather than the facts and just being what they are. Again, it's this nasty feedback loop of escapism and realization of the errors of their ways to some degree, but then claiming, no, it can't be that. Cognitive dissonance. I could not be this stupid, therefore I must be right. Really, I mean, we all use a bit of cognitive dissonance, a little bit here and there. I certainly do. The viewer does. Everybody does it sometimes. And it's a coping mechanism. It makes us feel more comfortable about ourselves. Knowing that what we're doing isn't in line with our belief system sometimes will drive us to use that excuse mechanism or justifying ourselves, because if we're not in line, if our behaviors aren't in line with what we believe, we feel like we're lying to ourselves. But here's the thing, they're lying to themselves so much more than they would rather realize, but that's why the cognitive dissonance comes in anyway. They'd rather not realize and try to justify it. This is a very nasty habit. Again, another part of many feedback loops. It goes round and round. Where it ends, nobody knows. So there we go. If your rights are being ignored, don't go to that court. And the bit where it says don't go to that court is in all caps, like ramming home the message. Very lacking in wisdom. It's not healthy. If you've got a court demand and you feel don't matter about provable facts, you feel like, oh, your rights are being ignored, then it's your right to use your rights to say to that court, I feel like I'm being penalised here, my rights are being ignored. So then there's a look at what rights are being ignored, if you have any rights around a certain arena of comings and goings and a certain protocol of how a court applies itself and so on. If there's anything in there that's provable of whatever your rights are within your country, then fine, get it done, but don't just make stuff up and claim. But they will always do this and claim, oh, what about my freedom of speech? And there's such a severe lack of understanding freedom of speech from these people. So don't go to that court if the judge has a previous relationship with said persons, aka, or also known as, a conflict of interest, and allows that person to circumvent the law and perjure themselves 80 plus times. Don't go to that court. That's a lot of mental gymnastics right there. I did jury service in the UK, and it's still the same ruling in the United States, as far as I can tell, is if there is anybody even on the jury that you know in person, or you know the criminal that's being penalised, or you know the judge in person, and so on, to a substantial level, then you generally have a conflict of interest. But the laws and the ruling generally mitigates that. This is why when I had jury service, they basically take postal codes and randomly pick through the postal codes and say, oh, we need you for this court issue. They come to the court and we need you for jury service. And you can get out of it with some loopholes. You can say, oh, I can't turn up because of whatever, fill in the gaps. But, I was out of work at the time, so I thought, yeah, I'll turn up, and unless you got a good excuse, like I said, you could go it. There's a hefty fine for not turning up. You need the substantial, within the rules excuse, and you need within the rules claim to back up your claim that there's conflict of interest at all, to prove that the people, criminal or witness or otherwise, know anything too much about perhaps a judge or somebody on a jury or a witness. Sure, that would be conflict of interest, right? So these people do this all the time. They make up these accusations. Oh, there's conflict of interest. The court is corrupt, and there's lots of name calling, bitching, crying about the situation because it's copium. They hate themselves. They hate what they've done. And they could never be this wrong. Therefore, they must be right and justified. It's always escapism, and they can't stop. They're addicted to this like it's crack. Like I said, like it's a drug. And you find that these individuals tend to be abusers, alcohol, drugs, Xanax, and other, THC, all these things. And why do we use recreational drugs? And it's escapism, right? It's escapism. Today I had 2 pints of cider, and that's a little bit of escapism for me. And I had steak and chips. Chips in the UK are not what America calls it. Is fries, but they're real chips. I say real because American fries, there's barely any potato left there, and it's so many preservatives, but far nicer and much more nutrition, I would say. Regardless of that, I'm going on a rant too much about that. So steak, peas, chips, fried onion rings, there were some peas, tomatoes, little cherry tomatoes, really nice. And it's a place I go quite regular, very nice. So I had good sustenance there. So there's this nonsense. If the judge has a previous relationship with said persons, the judge wouldn't be allowed to judge. Mention it and bring in a new judge. But they don't want that. They want nobody to be, no law, no court whatsoever. They want it all to go away, magically disappear, and their claims of corruption be substantiated, but they're not grounded in reality. They're only grounded in the fantasy over here and reality here. Well, sorry, this one wins over the fictional fantasy that they're embedded into because they can't cope with the reality. So you get conflict of interest, and that allows that person 80 plus times. What, did they count? No, they just pulled a number out their ass. Don't go to that court. So really, all this is saying is, I'm scared. I'm not going to that court because it's scary. Reality is scary, and they bury their head in the fiction. If the judge, so if your rights are being ignored, don't go to that court. Paranoia that it's driving on what excuse. I could say my rights are being ignored and I feel like I'm being penalised. Well, you feel insecure because, number one, even before a court demand, you feeling insecure anyway. They just want this to go away. But they caused it anyway, and again, the cognitive dissonance. They could never be that bad, therefore they must be justified, and they must be right. Wow. This is why they won't stop. And it's also why these individuals do the exact opposite to a sensible demand. Because it's not reality driven, it's fiction driven, right? And last but not least, if you do not feel safe in a court of law, don't go to that court. Well, really, if you're the criminal or part of a criminal group and you got a court demand to a court hearing, you don't feel safe because the reality is closing in and showing you a mirror of who you really are. And no matter how much you squirm and try to escape to that fiction, the reality will still win over. It sucks that nobody gets out of life continuously. Nobody gets out alive, so to speak. Everyone's life eventually ends because age happens and so on. Sure, a lot of cognitive dissonance comes up around that. People thinking, I'm going to prolong my life with all these different things. And sure, you can do that. You can prolong your life comparatively. But this is the thing, we always compare one thing to another. Comparatively to somebody else who's got a shorter life, who's got too much substance abuse and a body of trophies, or substance abuse and alcoholism, eating too much junk food, or doing things that are not very healthy and cause damage biologically and shorten your life, as opposed to somebody who's far healthier, doing what they can health-wise to be fitter and healthier, losing body fat to a level that's healthier comparatively to somebody who keeps gaining body fat. Sure, we can do things, but at the end of the day, that day is always going to come when that biological system, the body, will shut down, will finish. Unfortunately, and I hate saying it and thinking about it as much as the next person. It sucks, but if everyone lived forever, you think the planet's crowded now? Holy shit, there would be a big problem, right? So, last but not least, if you don't feel safe, don't go to that court. Oh, and if you're black, don't go to that court. So this is a projection of racism, claiming that the court is racist against a black person just because they're black. This is how paranoid this individual is. And you may, as somebody who's new to this YouTube channel and new to what is this all about that I'm referring to, you may think, really? There's got to be something going on there for that to be so vitriolic and paranoid. Yeah, what's going on is the individual I've talked about THC. They have. THC-induced psychosis is a real thing. Even doctors are talking about it now, finally, and taking it very seriously. There's been cases out there, murder cases out there, from individuals that, for all intents and purposes, they were never done a crime before, but they were smoking weed all day long. And there's one case, a 21-year-old, smoking weed all day long, stabbed his girlfriend. The girlfriend fell into this lake and an alligator ate her. That sounds absurd, right? But they did a test of what was in his blood. They found high levels of THC. They kind of dismissed it and said, a mental illness. Oh yeah, caused by too much THC. But they'd be looking for other things instead. They would be looking for cocaine or all these other drugs, but they're kind of dismissing THC because it became kind of normalized. But now they're seeing that that's a problem. It's like society with alcohol. Alcohol really is a hardcore drug. Drugs generally are anything that changes your mental makeup and how you see the world and all this. Alcohol definitely changes the mind in some ways, in the same way that THC does, but THC is doing something very different to what alcohol's doing, yet they both have the similar side effects in terms of your confidence going up, like a fake confidence, a delusion of confidence. But underneath that is that paranoia driving up, because alcohol also has been shown to get people paranoid. You know, it goes up, it goes all one extreme to another. You get that boost of, bear with me, I need to re-log in. A boost of confidence to a point, but then you look at the world in a paranoid way, but while feeling confident. So it's superficial, right? And THC does that. So it's very superficial. It's shallow, superficial, and raises the reactionary mind rather than the higher thinking mind in usage, because it's shutting down the higher thinking mind. The paranoia and so on is driven by the mammalian brain, some of the oldest parts of our brain, in a freeze, fight or flight response. They know something's wrong, but they don't understand it because they're not trying to understand it with a higher thinking. Alcohol does that, THC does that, I've talked about that. So this individual says, basically you can interpret what this is I'm scared I'm of the court, so I'm not going to that court. And they think, well, because they're so fictional driven, they think that's going to work. So you see why I think he needs to write about this. This is complex, actually, with this levels of self-detriment, self-destruction. I'm scared of my rights being penalised, so I'm not going to court, is basically what the first line says in interpretation, really. I'm scared of the judge. It might be in cahoots with the victim, so I'm not going to court, is the next thing that really says. Because I use a lot of words to try and back up their fear, right? But they putting the fear out as if it's a factual claim. Don't go to that court. Where was it? And last but not least, if you don't feel, I don't feel safe, so I'm not going to that court. A court demands, again, one more time, a court demands a criminal to arrive in court, and they're responding with, I don't feel safe about this, I'm not going. Because they know at some level that they are criminal. But it's not in the presence of mind so much, the conscious mind, because they lack the self-awareness, because that, any ounce of self-awareness is driving them to, I can't deal with that. I'm this fictional character, I'm hardcore, I'm this. It's a coping mechanism every time. This is why, even if jailed or in prison, whatever the difference is, I think jail is like local imprisonment, and prison is, I'm not sure. Correct me on that, if you will, or put a comment below what the difference is. But if they get locked away anyway for their foolishness in wherever they're locked away, they will still cry louder. They will still claim that they are the victim, while being obvious that they were the victimizer every single time. I've seen this many times, of the way in which people use this nasty feedback loop to justify their own foolish actions. I've seen it with people out there I've met in person. I've seen it with a family member. I've seen it over the internet. And when you have to deal with that level of denialism from a family member, it causes a massive amount of stress. Because they were never, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter how many times you tell them with multiple ways of consistent logic and reasoning, they run away from logic and reasoning because it scares them. It scares them because it's grounded in reality, and it helps to underline and explain their foolishness. But no, it's not them, it's you or the world or somebody else every time, because it scares them that they could actually be that broken. So what do? They escape and go into escape mode, fantasizing. This individual fantasizes he's somehow some kind of wolf who's a leader of his pack. Leader of a hate gang, a bully gang, driving this individual off the internet. Thank you very much for watching. Hope this has helped clarify a number of things here. And I personally have baited this individual to show others how primitive they are. And it proved to be the case. The goal of how I did this was achieved. You know, the goal was to show how primitive they are. They are actually claiming now that somehow I'm a hacker, paranoid that I could hack them or hack all their stuff. You don't need to. If I was an astute, hacking, skilled individual, I still wouldn't even bother to use it against them, because they reveal who they are via their nasty vitriol over the internet. Use one more variable in underlining these people never go anywhere or do much. Probably, maybe in this case, certainly in this case, it's a poverty-stricken area this individual lives. Great support of the evidence, they never go anywhere. 9 tweets on average per hour, or X's or X.com, whatever you want to call it. I would still call them tweets. Per hour. And they're hateful, they're name-calling, they're smear campaign, slurring, and nasty names. It's very childlike. But again, they're not responsible adults, because they wouldn't be childlike otherwise. But they're claiming they infantize their targets, claiming they're childlike. Again, it's always, is the truth being that way? No, flip it over. No, it's you, or this way, whatever. It's a flip back. Pointing the errors, the ways that, no, you. Yeah, well, prove it then. And they can't prove it, but the evidence supports they are the problem. Again, I did say goodbye, but you get the point. And I think talking about it this way, people know this already. But when you lay it out like that, it all starts clicking in, and you think, wow. It all begun, it's just like a brain fog disappears, and you end up seeing past the noise, because these people are very noisy because they're insecure. Small dogs make the most noise. Larger animals, larger dogs are usually quieter, because they have more confidence. The smaller the dog, the more insecure they are about their small stature. And humans are kind of a little bit like that as a metaphor, where you're big, small, or it doesn't matter, but how big you think you are out there in the world in terms of your power out in the world. Powerful people don't need to shout so much. Donald Trump is not powerful. Not in true power. Well, we talk about true power. It's not what I call power when you're destroying everything, right? That's destruction. And that's not, true power is the appliance of true power helps you help others. That's true power in the world. We have a misunderstanding, I think, in society what power really is, right? And we mistake control for power and vice versa. Peace out. Thank you very much for watching. Take care. I look forward to doing another video soon. Welcome to the Exploratory Minds project. This is kind of right up my street for this one, and many others to come. Cheers, bye. Oh, wrong button. Bye.